Here is the whale brie. On my laptop, we're going to do grid enlarging first. So I will now zoom in. You can see we're going to do 2 centimetre squares and make them 3 centimetre squares. So let's fast forward this. Now remember, when you draw a straight line, make sure that the ruler is nice and flat, and then you spread your hands and give yourself paper to be able to press down so the ruler doesn't move. Now I've numbered that, and I'm just doing some maths to make sure that I can fit it across 3 centimetres. So I'm enlarging it by a half. Give yourself 2 centimetre gap, 3 centimetres across. I give myself a 5 centimetre gap, and then 3 centimetres across all the way. Now what happens, of course, when you draw your straight lines, you really need to make sure that you've got plenty of paper and that you've lined it up. So make sure you stretch out, of course, stretch your hand out, give yourself plenty of paper under your ruler, nice and straight. Yes, I know my shoulder's in the way, we'll just have to deal with that. So the grid enlarging, 3 centimetres by 3 centimetres, and the actual pitch is 2 centimetres. I number across the top, letters down the bottom. Now the idea is to use each square and draw, paying particular attention to where lines intersect the horizontal and vertical, because this way you can get a nice mapping out of the negative shape, checking corners, checking intersections, and give yourself enough line. Yeah, map out broad negative shapes for the splashing and for the various shapes inside the whale. Yes, I'm sorry, my shoulder's in the way. So you can see the line work now, ready to start blocking in. So, of course, we want our cool palette. I'm going to use the computer so I've got a bit of an idea of the colours. I'm losing blue and purple, lots of white, a bit of green there. Maybe I'll use it, get my brushes out. Lots of water in the blue first, lots and lots and lots of water. And what we're doing is we're just mapping out the negative shape, which is the water. You can see that. Lots and lots of water first. Remember, painting is layers. So you can see how the layer will come there. I know my shoulder's going to be in the way for a bit of this, but you can make a judgment. You can see how wet the paint is. It's like a wash almost. Now, we're not using this as watercolour. I mean, you could use it as watercolour, but what we're doing here is building the underpainting to build up colour. So, I'll stop talking now. Please fast forward if my shoulder's in the way. You'll see I'll map out the various colours. I'll give myself a bit of blue with the white for the sky. Now, I'm not going to try and get exactly the colour, but we're washing it out. Make sure the sky is a different blue to the water. You know, of course, water doesn't have a colour. It's just reflecting the colour of the sky. And you can see that I've mapped out the negative shape of the of the subject that we're painting. So very washed out, watery blue for the sky. And then I'll get another plate, add a bit of black to it, because of course I want to do, but I don't want to use a dead black. Black, of course, is not a good thing to use. When we do our, when we use black, we always add a little bit of blue to it, always, because that cools it down and of course makes it recede. You can see I'm making that black there. Lots of water again, because this is the underpainting. You can see that I'm using the next negative shape, where I can just add on and imagine just where the black is. I've left a bit of white there, paper, because that's where the spray is going to be, and we'll work that down. So remember, it's important to understand I'm not using the black as a line. I'm using it to map out shapes. Then some blue inside there, just to line where the shapes are. I'm making underpainting very wet. Now there's no white at all there on the animal's belly. It's just paper at the moment. And if we were to do watercolour, you would just leave it as paper. But of course I don't want to do that. Now what I'm mixing is a little tiny bit of the blue grey, the blue black into the white, so I have that cooler white. That means, and I'll just go over the black there. You can see I'm doing this wet underpainting, building up the underpainting. Now what I tend to do is map out lines and map out the sort of tonal shapes that I want to use, and then paint over them, because it sort of like refers my memory to where I want things to be. So, white over the water splashes. I don't want to leave any paper at all. And I'm just, as I said to you, I'm just mapping out this stuff here. This is just underpainting to try and get an idea of how it would look, because of course I'll be going over all that. This is the first coat. Just to get an idea of how things work out. And I'm consistently referring back to the image on the laptop screen there to make sure that I've got the sort of format that I want. Now, underpainting to give the tone, to give this idea of the whale's body being cylindrical. Add some more white. Just looking at how things will map out. Get some more shadows in there. You can follow on. Now again, there's this thing about mapping what the shape will be like. I'm sorry my shoulder's in the way, but you can see I'm doing the lines. That's the torso of the whale. I'm doing that because I want to make sure that I get the same sort of feel for the painting. This is underpainting. Everything works as a composition. So with your underpainting, you should try and map out the broad areas that you're looking at. See how you can move the lines. Now what I'm going to do is get rid of the image, and I'm going to just start concentrating on the painting and going over the overpainting now. Just need the black and white now because I've established the colour. You can see that I'm now blending, put a bit of a light bluey black, little tiny bit, then some white, and blending over to get the round shape of the animal before I put the lines in. Why did I put the lines in first? Just to give me a visual cue about how the thing's going to look. I will go over those. Yeah, I'm now putting some details in. Can you see I'm working on that blue-black? Sorry about the shine on the plate, but I'm now covering over the animal's black again. I know what the white's going to do. I want to give more oomph to the whale's body. You can see blending over those lines because I've got some details now. I'll just slow down here to show you. I'm now adding some paint. This is much thicker paint, a lot less water. Trying to now start to build the shapes. Now, of course, you've got the shadow on that fin there we have to work on, and building the body up. So remember, by putting on our coats, we get a vibrant sort of look, and I'll then go over that with white to give that spray. Sorry, my shoulder's in the way, but I use the edge of the brush, the beveled edge of the brush, to do those lines. Then with a very fine brush, I'm now going over and putting white either side of those, because there's a bit of shine on the photocopy. You can see the shine. So adding some lines in there. They don't have to be absolutely accurate. Bit of brush strokes there for that crustacean thing on his chin, but we don't have to be too accurate. Remember, it's just giving the impression, and of course, like all good paintings, we finished the painting. I'm now using blue and white, and different types of blue with a bit of purple in it to give it some oomph for that front piece, and then some white, and I'm using my paintbrush to go over and give that sort of water effect. And yes, I know my shoulder's in the way, guys, I'm sorry, but you can see when I step back that I'm working that paint. That's thicker paint now, going over, getting the edges, looking at using the brush strokes to give a watery sort of effect. It isn't watery paint. Bit of blue, bit of white, get the spray happening, get the edges up, and you can see how we're slowly building up the amount of layers that we need. White and blue, mixing it around, and quite thick paint now, because we want that consistency of thickness. It will dry, it won't be shiny like that when it's dry. And working on the texture. You can see adding a bit of green there, just to give it a bit coolness on that side. Give myself a nice thing. Now I'm leaving that space there, there's that green there. I then go back over it with blue because it's a bit too green. But notice I'm leaving that white space there that I'd already done those. So that's like a bit of underpainting. Now I'm going to use a fine brush and just trickle over. I'll slow that down to normal pace to show you what I'm doing. Now what I'm doing there is, as you can see, I'm taking my time and I'm just building up layers of the white, trying to get those shapes going across. Now, of course, it's not going to look like the photo. We don't want it to look like the photo. We want it to look like a painting, where the paint, the brush strokes actually work through. The same with that spray there. Now, of course, spray is really hard to paint, Bree. Thank you for giving me a spray thing. But you can see that I'm trying to work over and make sure that the white's over the top. It dissolves a bit of the shape because that's what it's doing in the photocopy, dissolving the shape of the whale. But it gives it a bit of dynamic stuff, which I think works out quite well. So, of course, working through there, a little bit more white, using the edge, very fine, light, lots of paint, and not spreading, not pushing too hard, trying to get that shape happening. I'll speed it back up. And you've heard me say this time and time again, you must make a painting, not a picture. We put the same amount of effort in the top corner of the painting, I'm trying to build that sky up, and it's not all one colour, that'd be boring. Let's use the brush stroke. Let's use the negative shape. Let's give ourselves the feeling of paint over the top. I didn't too much green there, so I'm just going back over that, but I've got a bit of the green there. Add a little few more dops and bops, a little bit there, and our sketch is almost done. So we call that a painting sketch. Remember, everything we're doing here is learning how to apply paint. I hope you have fun doing it, Brianna. If you remember from the Elvis painting, they have bits of white. Try and give yourself some time to look back, add some highlights, make sure you feel comfortable with the way in which the final piece is. And as it dries off, we have our final piece. We're looking close, you can see there's brush strokes. There's a feeling of thickness with the paint that gives you a really lovely effect. When it's dry, you can see that drying out. You can see the texture there, the highlights, adding the paint on, so you get a painting, which is what we're after.